Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here in more ways than you know. I come from Chicago, and Chicago, you know, is the second largest Polish city in the world. I have lots of Polish friends. I have a Polish-born physical therapist who helped me with my hip operations. Old people, this hip operation is wonderful. I was walking with 2 canes, and now I can walk with no canes. Even John Maynard canes. And she's Polish, and she's climbed Mount Everest twice. There is an athlete. I'm also glad to be here in this glorious room. I mean, I've seldom seen an academic hall so impressive as this. You know, I think it's important for students, faculty too, but especially for students, that their surroundings be dignified and glorious. You know, we tend to think, oh, well, we'll just put the students in a ill-heated Quonset hut or a modern building with the windows don't work and heating seldom works, and that's okay. That's good enough for students. I don't think so. I think all your classrooms should be like this. And you'd go around thinking, oh, I'm at the university. Oh, how wonderful. Anyway, that's part of my point. That the virtues of a life include the transcendent, the higher goals of our life. The answer to the question, so what? Apparently you have a phrase in Polish, as every language does, a kind of cynical, so what? In Dutch it's, and nu, and now. That's one level of ethics that economics doesn't talk about. Now, the Department of Economics that I just came from, with its art museum in the hallways, excellent art on the walls, that's combining the sacred, the higher goals of human life, with what we normally teach in economics, which you would call the profane. The sacred, the profane. And to call it sacred and profane is not to make fun of either. The sacred, I'm sure there are many football fans here, can be your football club, or your family, or science, or Poland, or art. What's it for? And new. Why does it matter? Those are the top. You can call them the top, you can call them the bottom too. It doesn't matter. I'm not saying the profane is bad, but the profane is the daily economic matter. Spending within your budget constraint, we economists say. Supply and demand. How to run an efficient economy, on which I have views sharply different from those of most of my colleagues. I'm a liberal in the European sense. But on ethics, then, the sacred and the profane. Each of the levels of ethics has its characteristic virtues and then corresponding vices. Because, well, I'll go into that. But the top, this sacred area, is the is the realm of, well, faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love, as St. Paul said. Faith is the virtue of having an identity. Now, I'm also a Christian. I'm a Christian liberal. I'm an Anglican follower of the Church of England. We call it Catholic light. Catholic light. So faith is the virtue of having an identity from which you start. You're a woman, you're Polish, you're an economist, you come from somewhere. It's about who you are. And without having any identity, any faith, your life is, pointless. Your hope is the forward-looking virtue of having a project, right? Having a project. What's your project in life? Think about it. Now, at the age of most of the people in this room, don't worry if you don't have it all worked out. It'll gradually come to you if you work on it. So hope is forward-looking, faith is backward-looking. Love, the kind of love I'm talking about, is not human love, the love I had for my spouse of 30 years, or the love I had for my dogs, one of whom was named Jane Austen, and the other, she died in my arms, and then I got Will Shakespeare. Made it very easy for the people in the neighborhood to remember the name of my dogs, because they knew these famous people. It's not that love, which is characteristically human and important, and mammalian for that matter, but it's the love of the transcendent. It's the love for your soccer team, the love for the family, the love for Poland, the love for science. So those are the three transcendent virtues at the top, as I say. And at the bottom is the characteristic economic virtue, which is prudence. Now, I'm not just making this up. I didn't just say, no, let's see, what are the virtues? Oh, yeah, faith, hope, and charity. And oh, yeah, there's prudence and temperance and justice and courage. No. These are the tradition of the West. The three transcendent virtues are called the Christian virtues. Not, alas, because Christians show them to any significant extent or any unusual extent, but they talk about them a lot and admire them. Faith, hope, and transcendent love. And the other four, because there are 7 in total of this philosophical psychology, are the so-called cardinal virtues, from the Latin for hinge, cardo, hinge, cardo, cardinus, the cardinal virtues of the classical Mediterranean, Greece and Rome. And they are 4: prudence, justice, temperance, and courage. Prudence, justice, temperance, and courage. And those 4, if you think about them, and I have at some length in this book, which is not the one that's been translated into Polish. The one that's been translated into Polish is the more economically oriented one. We're talking this evening about economics, yes, but about ethics and theology and what the good life is. They're called cardinal virtues because it's on which a small polis, a small city-state, hinges. You need those 4: prudence, temperance, justice, and courage, to avoid the expedition to Syracuse, the disastrous move of the Athenians late in the Peloponnesian War. You need courage, because the men, and indeed and indirectly the women of the community, were engaged in war more or less continuously. Of course, you needed courage. And you needed justice within the society generally, and temperance, the internal justice, the internal balance of an adult, of a person who has control over her impulses. It's very easy to illustrate the corresponding vices in Donald Trump, who's an extraordinary example of a lack of prudence, temperance, justice, and courage. He would not be a very good Roman citizen. So 4 plus 3 equals 7. And those are the, what could you call them? You could call them the elements of the virtues. That is, they're the undiagnosed, what would you say, the unsplittable virtues that combine with others. For example, honesty is prudence in speech combined with a certain amount of courage and a certain amount of temperance. So you can combine these 7 virtues and make them into molecules of other virtues. Purity, nobility, etc. These would all be constructed out of the 7 virtues. Now notice that I put prudence as the economic virtue. Prudence is at the bottom. Prudence, St. Thomas Aquinas said, is the executive virtue. It's know-how, savoir-faire, as the French say. That's what prudence is. Knowing how to get things done. If you love and have hope and justice and courage and so on, but haven't got prudence, you're a fool anyway. And you're not going to succeed in your project of love or courage, right? So you need prudence. So prudence is at the bottom. Prudence is the profane, and that's what economists mainly study. I think my new friend here and I agree that economics should be balanced, or how can we say, supplemented, by considering the other virtues in a serious way. And in some ways we already do this. We talk about social justice, a concept I'm not very comfortable with, but let's go with it. As I said, I'm a Christian liberal, so I certainly think we have an obligation for the poor, for the least among us. But I don't think that the conventional ways of social justice are a very good way of achieving real justice. But in any case, economics is about this bottom. Now observe, there's the transcendent, there's the profane. In the middle are the considerations that we usually talk about when we talk about ethics. Because it's a persistent error in modern ethical philosophy, by philosophers as much as by economists, to assume that ethics is only about how we treat other people. Now, I think treating other people is a very important part of ethics, but it's not all there is. To have a full human life, to express your humanity in the most complete and glorious way, you need to also take care of yourself. I'm a perfect example. For 3 months, I've been on a low-carbohydrate diet. After 3 days, it wasn't hard to do. Anyone here who has a weight problem, I highly recommend it. Don't eat spaghetti, as I just did. Don't drink beer. I don't ever do that anyway. Don't eat bread. Don't eat candy. And I love candy. Don't eat those wonderful Christmas cookies that you make in Poland. I have a Polish friend who makes them every Christmas. And I've lost 10 kilos. And intend to lose 10 more. So that's prudence, that's know-how. That's how to get it done. Temperance. I didn't have to exercise very much, fortunately. But there's this, so that's taking care of yourself, and then taking care of this higher level of what it all means. But in the middle, yes, there's an ethical job for taking care of other people, of not riding roughshod, as we say in English, over other people. In fact, I've come to think of it in terms, this middle area in which courage and justice and human love and temperance are exercised on other people, right? The courage of the policeman who protects you from the bad people, say, or the courage of the fireman who ran towards the collapsing Twin Towers in New York in 2001. That's in aid of other people. And I've come to think of it in terms of the golden rule. Not the cynical golden rule that economists tend to approve of. Not that we don't approve of it exactly, but we think it's rather important. Those who have the gold rule. I don't approve of that at all. But the golden rule has two forms. Hillel of Babylon, 1st century BCE, Jewish sage, put it negatively. He said, "Do not do unto others what you would not want to be done to you." And that's a masculine, libertarian, don't tread on me version of how to treat other people. Don't mess with me, because I'm not going to mess with you. You shouldn't mess with me. I saw a cartoon in Polish the other day of this person, this liberal like me, coming to dominate the world. The globe was there, and this sinister man was seizing the world. And the caption was, "The liberal is going to take over the world and leave you alone," which is about right. That's the masculine and negative version. The other version is by another Jewish sage of the 1st century CE, who you may have heard of, who said, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." Don't pass by on the other side in the terms of the parable of the Good Samaritan. Be nice. Be positively nice. And those I think we need both of those. I think we need them because they check the excesses of the other. If you have this only this negative version, then you will pass by on the other side. Someone's lying on the roadway. He's been beaten up by robbers. Even the priest passed by on the other side because it's none of my business. Whereas the follower of Jesus of Nazareth takes it as her responsibility to help the person. But likewise, there are excesses in that too. And I would claim that modern governments, modern economists in particular, are completely neglectful of this first commandment, not commandment, that's not the word, this version, this negative version, and extremely eager to reach into your life and help you. You know the three most unbelievable sentences in English? One, the check is in the mail. You'll get your payment soon. Number two, of course I'll respect you in the morning. Think about it. Number three, I'm from the government and from economics and I'm here to help you. So we have this middle level of virtues, the top level, the bottom. And as I argue in the book, the actual economy deals with all of them. It's not true that business people are ravenous cheaters and trying to make as much money as possible no matter how vile their methods. Most people in business are pretty much as ethical as the average professor, in my experience. And they want to be full human beings. And so they act like human beings. They act like their mother told them to act. And in any case, humans are extremely cooperative animals. By comparison with the other great apes, chimpanzees and gorillas, humans spontaneously cooperate vastly more. It's only gorillas and chimpanzees who fit the assumptions of non-cooperative game theory, which suggests to me a problem with non-cooperative game theory. So we want to be virtuous. We can be virtuous in the economy as well. And that was the main point of that book. It's not true, as is commonly said, that dealing with the profane, as anyone in business has to do, you've got to find customers who want to buy your product. You have to satisfy the customers. You have to seek them and satisfy them. It's not true that that corrupts your immortal soul. If it did, I guess I'd stop being an economist. If I thought that paying attention to cost and benefit, there are proposals, I think, to build high-speed trains in Poland. I don't know, between this town and Warszawa. Don't do it. I was trained as a transportation economist. It's a stupid project. The politicians will say, but it's glorious. Poland will be up there with Spain, having masses of idiotic high-speed trains with no passengers on them. That'll be wonderful. No, it won't. So you need the prudence. You need the cost and benefit arguments that economists like me delight in. But you also need the other virtues. And setting aside economics, in business, that's how people behave. There's a story, there's a constant story, an accepted story about the so-called robber barons. The robber barons in the United States in the late 19th century. Carnegie and Rockefeller and Jay Gould and all these terrible people. The analogy was with the barons along the Rhine, who used to put a chain across the Rhine, and in order for your boat to get past them, you'd have to pay them. Of course, it meant the Rhine wasn't much used for anything, because there's a problem of overuse of this common property resource. But it's a myth. John D. Rockefeller, for example, was a notably charitable man. From the time he was a young businessman in Cleveland, Ohio, he was a Baptist. That was his Christianity. And he tithed to his church. He gave 10% of his income to his church and gave lots of other money too. At his death, he set up Rockefeller University and the Rockefeller Foundation and so on and so forth. Andrew Carnegie famously said, "A man who dies rich dies thus disgraced. It is a disgraceful thing not to give away your money." And so, you've never heard of any Carnegie. He could have made his daughter and his offsprings and his cousins back in Scotland unspeakably wealthy down to the 4th or 5th generation, but he didn't. Instead, he did things like opening 4,000 public libraries, in one of which, in Wakefield, Massachusetts, it was a Carnegie library. I read the socialist classics, and at 16 became a Trotskyist. Hey, that's an irony. That's part of the virtue of a liberal and virtuous market society. So in short, I'll stop here. In short, we don't need to choose between God and Mammon. I'm going to write a book in the next couple of years called God in Mammon. Mammon is the Aramaic word for money. And Jesus said, or supposed to have said, you can't serve both God and Mammon. Well, my friend, I don't agree with that. You can serve God and Mammon. And my book is going to be called God in Mammon, Economic Sermons. And I'm going to show in actual sermons based on text, biblical texts, how you can be a Christian and yet be in business or be an economist. So that's my story. You don't have to abandon your principles to be rich. Now, again, Donald Trump is an uneasy example because he's rich and he has no principles. And he abandons whatever principles he accidentally acquires very fast. But he got rich by being repeatedly subsidized by his father, who was rich and had been an entrepreneur, and then being subsidized by the Russian government. So I don't think even Donald's a very good example of this. His golden toilets, he has golden toilets in his house, not in the White House, but up in New York. He's an example of the worst of the business world. But you know, there are bad people in all parts of the world, all occupations. There are bad soldiers and bad politicians and bad policemen and bad mothers, bad doctors, bad. We're a fallen race, so we're capable of evil. We have free will. But we don't have to lack in virtue to have an economic life. Thank you.